Welcome to Plan 9 Crunch. I'm Doug Gibson, and we're doing a scene bite today where we're talking about the film Black Dragons, which is a monogram film starring Bela Lugosi. It came out in early 1942, and what's interesting about this film is it may very well have been the first movie that was made after Pearl Harbor. That was essentially a propaganda film, but also a drama for people to enjoy. In the movie, Lugosi plays an actual former spy, sort of, for Germany, for the Nazis, who is starting to kill all these famous men in Washington, D.C., like high politicians, industrial giants, and things like that. But what's actually happened is all these guys are being picked off. They're members of a secret Japanese military spy society called Black Dragons. And they have kidnapped these prominent Americans and taken their appearances. They somehow managed to speak just like them. They somehow managed to convince their spouses, their sons and daughters, their siblings, dear friends, former classmates, that they really are the people they are. And that's the beauty of a monogram film. It asks you to suspend disbelief. Now, Black Dragons was actually a secret society among the Japanese at the time, so they're exploiting that for the movie. And once again, it was right after Pearl Harbor. Now, I want to watch a scene. We're going to watch the very beginning and maybe 2 minutes of the film, because there's a scene where a bunch of senators and major industrialists and things like that are hanging out with glamour girls. And that was as common in 1942 as it was in the 1970s, as it is today. In fact, I was thinking about this when I was watching it, that Wilbur Mills was a 1970s congressman who was brought down because he liked to hang out in cars and be drunk with a stripper. Okay, and also there was a woman named Elizabeth Ray, and I'm dating myself again, but in the 1970s she was alleged to have affairs with Wayne Hayes, a congressman, and also Mike Gravel, a U.S. senator. Gravel later admitted to it. Hayes never did, but Elizabeth Ray wrote a book called The Washington Fringe Benefit, and her publicity at the time basically drove Hayes out of office. And just recently they were debating something in the Senate, and one of the senators, Mark Wayne Mullen, I believe he is, was reminding senators that before they condemn other people, we could all talk about how many senators come at midnight drunk to vote on things. That caused a bit of controversy. But the whole idea is that the 1942 Black Dragons plays on the idea that there's a lot of hanky-panky going on among the most powerful in Washington, D.C. Jack, if you don't mind, we'll watch that scene right now. White Zone. This guy sells a sword to get the woman he loves. Bela Lugosi turns on him. Sam Katzman, Jack Deeds, familiar names. And you see things like Astor and Banner, they're sort of like subsidiaries of Monogram. Directed by William Nye, he made a lot of Monogram films.
I say, Reynolds, what's this I hear about the Army being interested in this project you're lobbying for?
Well, it's not for publication, but they're planning to build an ammunition dump near the dam.
I thought they were spending all that money just to help out a handful of farmers.
And when I mentioned to the committee that more than 50,000 troops are stationed within a mile of the depot, they immediately increased the appropriation by $500,000.
50,000 troops.
50,000 troops.
But don't forget, Mr. Hanlon, all of our shipyards are not located on the coast.
I love the actress on the right.
Now,
line
believe it
she
or
has
not,
up.
we have 4 shipways on the lakes. They're turning out an average of a ship a month.
That explains a lot of things.
With your influence in Washington, why don't you get a bill passed to increase the old age pension for glamour girls?
Now, I may say something. She didn't say
No,
American
you're good.
Bells. She said
We're not
glamour
calling this
girls,
precarious
despite what you might
occupation
read.
for love.
What our friend is trying to say is that you want to organize, start a revolving fund. Then you'll be able to speak the language that he understands. Right?
That's right.
Now that you mention it, it is an ideal location for an air base. The enemy could never spot it from the air, and it's
I
out
just
of
love the way the
range
guy's
of a naval
fawning
gun.
over the blonde there.
Perfect. I'm telling you.
Coffee is served menage.
Oh,
Coffee.
well, come on.
Wait for me, Blondie.
Wait for me, Blondie. Okay, Jack, we can probably go away now. Okay, let me give you a little bit of the plot. I think I told you some, but Lugosi comes back to Washington, D.C., and what happened is he was prominent as a plastic surgeon who made all these guys look American, all these spies. And then they threw him in prison. So they showed absolutely no loyalty and everything. And once again, a Monogram plot, he somehow does plastic surgery on himself in prison. And the little cell certainly isn't conducive to an operating room. And he comes back and starts killing these people off. Did I mention that Joan Barclay was in this movie? She was a Monogram starlet of the 30s and 40s, made a lot of Western films, but she was in she may be in more, but she was in Shadow of Chinatown, a late 1930s serial that Bela Lugosi made. You can watch that on YouTube or anywhere. And she also had a smaller role in the film The Corpse Vanishes, where she played a waitress who's recruited to be a fake bride. She was an excellent actress, and I enjoy her in this film. We're not going to go into this right now, but one interesting thing about this movie is here was Lugosi, probably about 60 or so now, and it's the last film where he was ever looked upon with interest by a woman in a movie. Joan Barclay she's playing the daughter of one of the spies, not a Japanese daughter, but an American daughter, but she's really an undercover agent, which was also an interesting thing to have her play. And I think I mentioned that Clayton Moore, who played the Lone Ranger, is also an agent for the U.S. But Barclay and Lugosi, what's the term? They flirt in this movie. There's no other way to put it. And Lugosi has never really been at this point of his career. He was earlier, of course, an object of feminine desire. So it's refreshing to see that in this movie. Black Dragons is an excellent programmer. It's different. It's a propaganda film. It's also an interesting, wacky spy movie of revenge. And Monogram really came out of the gates quickly to get this out there. I wish it would have a Blu-ray someday. It certainly deserves it. So by all means, go watch Black Dragons. You can buy it really cheap. You can watch it on several streaming services on YouTube. It doesn't cost a penny. And I just want to say that we really appreciate showing you this scene by today. We're Plan 9 Crunch. You can subscribe to us at YouTube. You can also go to TikTok and like us. You can watch us, you can read us on plan9crunch.com with our blog. And I have reviewed this movie more than once on plan9crunch.com. And at Facebook, we're at Plan 9 Crunch Podcast and Blog. You can like or follow. So this is Doug Gibson again. Thank you very much for watching this. Go enjoy the movie, and that's a wrap.